Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer from childbirth mortality in the hospital. In 2023, the maternal mortality rate for white women or Caucasians were 14.5 deaths per 100,000. And for Black women, 50.3 deaths per 100,000. I would like to speak to Black women. I need you to listen to me. Black maternal mortality rates continue to rise. It is systematic failure. So this podcast is not just another motherhood where we talk about, being moms and how great it is. We are here to help you, to teach you, to guide you that He has given to you. Faith and advocacy can coexist. You're using the voice that God has given you to steward yourself through this season. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease and Control, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer from childbirth mortality in the hospital. So let's take a look at the numbers. In 2023, the maternal mortality rate for white women or Caucasians were 14.5 deaths per 100,000. For Hispanics, 12.4 per 100,000. For Asians, 10.7 per 100,000 live births. And for Black women, 50.3 deaths per 100,000. So this is one of those episodes that will fuel you up with so much knowledge where it literally sparks a light under you and you feel informed and you feel ready to go forth with, your birth, your postpartum. It may enrage you, it may offend you, but we're going to get right into it. Welcome back, everyone, to Woman Word Podcast. I'm your host, Kim, and if you're joining us for the first time, this is a space where we teach and educate you on maternal health and advocacy. It's a community where we empower you through real stories, expert guidance, and faith. Before we get into things, I would like to speak to Black women. Please come to the front. I need you to listen to me. It does not matter your age. It doesn't matter your income. It does not matter your profession. It does not matter your degrees. It does not matter how great your insurance is. And it does not matter if you do everything right. Black maternal mortality rates continue to rise. It is systematic failure that continues to fail to listen, protect, and respond to Black women before, during, and after birth. So this is our reality. This is what I've seen. This is what I've supported through. I've held through. I've cried through. I've experienced enough to tell you this is our reality. This is our reality in maternal health. So this podcast is not just another motherhood where we talk about, being moms and how great it is. There are many podcasts like that, and I appreciate what they do. That's what they're meant for. Matter of fact, with my practice, Villa Haven, we have an entire subsidiary where we just cater and cultivate that moms. We have a mom community where we build up this community. This podcast, we are here to help you, to teach you, to guide you through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This is what we are called to do here in this podcast. This is our calling. This is my calling. So I just wanted to preface that really quick. So today we're going to chat about questions that you should ask your provider, your hospital, your doula, and numbers that you should know prior to giving birth in a hospital. Now, the questions that you should ask your provider, these are just my top 5 favorite questions, okay? There are many questions out there. There are a lot that could be suited to you or you feel that's not suited for you. These are just the top 5 that I think you should be able to ask your provider, your hospital, whenever you take your hospital tour or you're deciding to give birth, and your doula, if you already have a doula or if you are interviewing doulas. These are advocacy-based questions. These are important questions that you should know. So get ready to take some notes. So, number one, for the hospital, you want to ask, how do you feel about low intervention births when things get uncomplicated, when things are uncomplicated? So, that is, what is your intervention like? This is what you're gonna ask your provider. How do you feel about, interventions? What are your interventions like? What is your rate of using interventions? How are you with, me as a mom, as someone giving birth, just giving birth on their own? The second one is, what do you think of doulas? Surprisingly, a lot of providers are very anti-doulas. So this could be your provider if they're an OB or midwife. These questions are pertinent to both. Um, on both ends of the spectrum, they can be very, anti having a doula. So you want to ask, what do you think of doulas? How do you work with doulas? Do you welcome doulas? What are your cesarean and induction rates? That's a very good question to ask, especially if you are going in low risk, uncomplicated pregnancy so far and so forth. You want to ensure that you find out what are your provider's induction rates, their cesarean rates. How do you feel about birth preferences? This is big. Going into labor, we try to say anything can happen during labor. Well, you go in prepared, you go in with preferences that you prefer. You ask your provider, how do you feel about that? How open are you to me bringing my birth preferences and chatting with you about it? How open are you to respecting what's on my birth preferences list? All right. And the fifth question is, how do you support gentle or family centered cesareans? Now, maybe you are having a scheduled cesarean for a medically necessary reason, right? Maybe you are high risk and so forth. There are certain medical reasons why cesareans are the safest way to deliver your baby. Or maybe you just want to go in feeling prepared on both ways. So you want to find out, what are your cesarean rates? How are you with gentle C-sections? How are you with family-centered C-sections? That's a really, really good question to ask your provider. Now, questions that you should ask your hospital when you are on the hospital tour, or things that you should research about your hospital before choosing that hospital. The first one is the maternal mortality and morbidity rates. You want to find out what those rates are in the hospital. What does that look like? How is that handled? Are there any cases? Is there anything in the news about this hospital? The second one, which is my favorite, what is your cesarean section rate? The national C-section rate, according to research, shows that it is about 32%. So I like to say anything above that may suggest an overuse of interventions. So you always want to find out, what is the cesarean rate of that hospital. What type of interventions are practiced at this hospital? This is super important for you to ask. This is key. Interventions can mean anything that is helped to induce your labor, or, anything that is used throughout labor whilst you are delivering. You want to find out what that rate is, and how often does that hospital on a whole, use interventions. Are staff trained on anti-bias and anti-racism? Now more than ever, and this goes for any race, right? Black, brown, whatever you are, you want to find out the anti-bias, implicit bias, and anti-racism. Are your staff trained on that? What is your experience on that? Can you kind of chat with me about how you guys deal with that? Super important for you to ask your hospital. Is there a patient advocate available 24/7? And we're going to get a little bit into patient advocate a little later into the episode. But you want to find out about that patient advocate. That is the person, if something goes wrong, you call them into your delivery room, or you chat with them, you write to them afterwards and so forth, they advocate on your behalf. That is their goal. And the fifth question that I like telling, pregnant folks or families that they should inquire about with their hospital is, how is the postpartum period handled? You want to find out what postpartum feels like. What does it look like with that hospital? What are their procedures? What do they do? What do they promote? So this is super important for you to find out I would say, prior to choosing the hospital that, you would like to deliver in. Now, these are 5 questions that as a doula, I personally encourage folks to ask their doula. So whether you are interviewing doulas or you already have a doula that you love, go ahead and ask them those 5 questions. These are just my questions. Like I said, there are many other questions out there that is suited to, what your personal situation is and so forth, but these are just my top favorites. What is your practice or philosophy in being a doula? So it's almost like, why are you a doula? How do you practice? Can you explain that? That's very important. That allows you to know if you are in sync with the person. That allows you to understand how they practice, whether you are having an out of hospital birth or an in hospital birth. The other one is, what is your scope of practice? It's very, very important to understand what a doula's scope of practice is. There is a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of misconception out there about doulas. As doulas, we are not medical professionals. We are not medical professionals. So it's important that you speak with your doula about their scope of practice. Have them explain to you what that looks like for them, what that looks like for them when they deal with their clients, or when they're in the hospital room. Very important to find out what that scope of practice is. There is a common misconception, while research does show that women feel more empowered, the intervention rates are lower, inductions are lower, cesareans are lower when you do have a doula. Statistics shows our benefits. We have to understand that having a doula at your birth does not guarantee the perfect birth, your perfect, dream birth and so forth. That is not what we're here for. So you want to ensure that you understand what your doula brings to the table in terms of their scope of practice. You also want to ask, how do you collaborate with nurses, midwives, OBs? Ask how they collaborate with your providers. We are not here as doulas to be combative. We're not here to argue, to fight, of course, if something crazy happens, we're not just going to be timid and sit there and just, let craziness happen to our clients. But we're not here to, make decisions for you and, you know, bring combativeness to the delivery room. That's not our role. That's not how we work. That's not what should happen. So you want to ask your doula, how do you work with OBs, midwives, and nurses? What does that collaboration look like? What does your role look like at home if I'm having a home birth, at the birth center if I'm having a birth center birth? What does that look like in the labor and delivery room if I'm having a hospital birth? All right, very important that you know that. You want to also ask, how do you support clients in navigating hospital policies? Every hospital has different policies. There's no blanket one size fits all. You want to find out from your doula, how do they work with, helping clients understand those policies. While as a client, you should absolutely be doing your due diligence on your hospital's policies. Um, Doulas are also there to help walk you through certain things. So, chat with your doula about that, what that looks like for them. And the last one that I think is super important is, what does culturally responsive care mean to you? I think right now we are in a world where we're a melting pot. Everyone, doulas are not just for certain people. And this is what we promote. This is what we love. People come from various cultures and backgrounds. I have said before, I am from the Caribbean as well. So a lot of my culture, a lot of the things that I've learned from my grandma, my mom, I bring it into my practice. So it's important to know, from your doula, what does culturally responsive care, look like for you, especially if your doula maybe doesn't look like you, or they don't practice the same culture of you all don't share the same cultures and so forth. So definitely ask them what that looks like for them. How do they respect that? How do they leave space for that? And how do they help with that as well? So, aside from the questions, guys, I have said in the first episode, if you caught the first episode, that there are certain numbers that I need you all to have before going into that labor and delivery room. You need to have these numbers. If you are pregnant right now, Please write out these numbers. If you are postpartum, you definitely need these numbers. And if you know someone that's trying to conceive or are pregnant or and so forth, they need these numbers as well. The first one is you need to know the labor and delivery unit number of your hospital. So this is different from the hospital's main line. This is actually L&D. So your nursing station and so forth. So if something happens or you feel like something doesn't jive or something doesn't feel good, you call the hospital. If you have clarifying questions or instructions that you need that number to call the hospital. The second one, you need the number of your after hours on-call OB and midwife, whether it's an office, whether it's a reception area and so forth. You definitely need that number before going in and giving birth. The third one is the patient advocacy office. Very important. I'm going to say this again. The patient advocacy office. You need the number of patient advocacy. This is used for whether care was provided without consent. You feel like your boundaries were violated. Maybe your requests are being ignored. Even if you are currently in the delivery room, they can come in, or maybe you are postpartum and you're ready you want to file a report or so forth. They hear you out. That is what they're here for. You need the patient advocacy number. The fourth one is the charge nurse or the nursing supervisor's office number. So if you have any concerns, if you feel like there's a breakdown in communication and so forth, you need the number of that charge nurse or the nursing supervisor station. The other one is hospital compliance or their risk management office. So this is mainly for postpartum. Maybe you felt like there were errors in your labor and delivery. Maybe you felt like there was retaliation if you spoke. You felt violated. Your consent was taken away from you. You want to make a formal complaint beyond patient relations. You need the number of the risk management or the hospital compliance office. Very important that you have this. You need this number. If you're pregnant now and you don't have it, go get it right now. You need this number in your back pocket. The other one is the medical records department. This one I tell every pregnant person giving birth in the hospital to have your medical records department. This is where you request notes. You request the notes from your birth. You are preparing, maybe you are filing legal action, right? Something happened. You need your birth notes. Maybe you would like to review the documentation after concerning birth, or maybe you had the smoothest birth possible. Either way, I encourage every client, get that medical records department number and request your medical records. You have a right to. A lot of times clients or patients feel like oh, I don't want to be too pesty, or I don't want to come off a certain way, or I don't want to seem too annoying and so forth. This is your right. This is your right. Ensure that you have the medical records department office. And then you want to have the hospital ethics line. This is important, super rare, but it's important. Of course, again, if you feel like there's a case building against you, that's without cause, if here violations were violated without stated preference and so forth, if there's conflict involving the anatomy of your birth, you need the hospital ethics line. And of course, you need the licensing board and the state Department of Health number. This is especially important if you are filing a lawsuit. Again, if you feel like there was neglect, abuse, discrimination, you have a right to call these people. You have a right to file complaints. All right. So I don't want this episode to feel like you're scared, you're giving birth. This is not what this is about, right? Again, we at Woman Word Podcast, we create this community for folks to feel empowered whilst going through birth and postpartum through faith. So that authority that the Lord has granted you, you have through Christ, you can carry that with you whilst you're going through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So birthing or giving birth or delivering without fear, it doesn't mean you're ignoring reality. it does not mean that you're ignoring reality. It means you're walking in knowing, you're walking in knowledgeable, you're walking in prepared and confident. Again, you're walking in with that authority of the Lord that He has given to you. Faith and advocacy can coexist, and you're using the voice that God has given you to steward yourself through this season. All right? So, again, please listen to this episode again and again. I implore you, especially if you're trying to conceive, if you're already pregnant, if you're postpartum, or if you're just someone, hey, I want to be a mom one day or I want to give birth one day. This episode is for you. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. And of course, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, send us your emails, and follow us at Womanwood Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.